Hi, welcome to our GR Reads program. It's a GRPL program that we do all summer long for adults. Tonight's program, Panel on Modern Families, is brought to you by the Grand Rapids Public Library Foundation and Wood TV. GR Reads is an adult summer reading program where we select 6 books and then tie programs back to those books. Tonight's program is tied to T.J. Klune's The House in the Cerulean Sea, which follows a man who forms a family with a man who is running an orphanage of magical misfits. And the story is about how they come together and become one family. And that got us thinking that there are a lot of different types of families nowadays: LGBTQ+, foster families, adoptive families, step families, extended families, found families. So we wanted to have a panel to talk a little bit more about these kinds of families. I do have a survey I'd like you to fill out if you have time today. We'd love to have your feedback on this program. Hopefully we'll have more time to do some in the future where we could explore these topics a little more in depth, because we have some wonderful panelists here today. The other program associated with this book is the Cerulean Sea Family Celebration that will be on August 21st at Riverside Park at the Bandshell by the Little League Fields. There will be free refreshments, crafts, lawn games, and story times featuring diverse families. And then we'll also have 3 professional photographers on hand so that everybody can walk away with a really nice professional family portrait. I'll put the link with more info in the chat. But now I'm going to turn it over to Lydia. She will moderate our discussion, keep us on track, and hopefully we'll get you as much possible as we can in an hour and a half.
Thank you, Sarah. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our conversation today. Like I said, or like Sarah said, my name is Lydia Bedford, and I'll be moderating. I do want to set some basic expectations today. We have a lot to talk about. This is a very large subject, and so we'll be sticking to about 15 minutes per topic because we will have Q&A for you at the end. So you can use the Q&A function in the Zoom, or you can hold your questions till the end. With that being said, we'll go ahead and get started and introduce our panelists. So I'll just ask that each of you raise your hands or wave. We do have Carrie Stratton Burrows. We have Charles Darling. Catrice Morning Bird Thornton. And Renee Orr Carr. And if you would like to read up further on them, Sarah will be posting a link in the chat for each one of their bios, and you'll also learn quite a bit through this conversation. So to start us off on our first topic, it's regarding gender and parenting. So as families are headed by LGBTQ+ parents, and it's becoming more common, there are struggles and pushback when people or family challenges the definition of gender and the roles it plays within a family. So the first question we'd like to ask is, what are some common misconceptions and or challenges that you face as a parent?
Hi, everyone. I am Charles. And 2 of the main things that I have found that seem to be what society thinks of parenting in LGBTQ families is one, that parents of the same gender, 2 parents of the same gender cannot be effective parents. In other words, they can't prepare their children to live on their own in the world. They don't give them the education they need. They don't give them the skills they need. What it usually boils down to, though, is that society is concerned that children of same-sex parents will not have role models and learn how to have a heterosexual relationship. And we know that those sorts of things can be found everywhere in society. It's not just parenting that teaches that. The second challenge that parenting as an LGBTQ person is that as a single parent, you have to do everything for your child. You have to cover all the roles. You have to do everything that is needed. Doesn't make any difference what your gender is. Because my gender changed while some of my children were still at home, and they still are at home, my responsibilities didn't change at all. That's what I have for that.
Hi,
Thank you.
everyone. Something I would say that we get pushback on a lot is the idea of gender, trying to explain to someone that gender is quite literally a social construct. It is nothing more than a social construct. The children we had ourselves, my husband and I, were all assigned female at birth. And my husband gets asked all the time, well, do you want a boy? And he's like, why? What is there I would do with a son that I'm not doing with my kids? So we place so much gender on things, toys, colors, clothes, makeup, things that are not gendered. Because my family comes from a long line of military family, there was a lot of pushback on pronouns with some of our kids. And we would quite honestly just explain to people, if it's hard for you to understand someone's pronouns, just call them by their name. We don't complain when somebody misgenders our dog. So there shouldn't be an issue if I correct you with my child. But if there is, then just call them by their name, because gender and gender expression are just all social constructs. So it's that simple.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in with any response there? Okay. All right, great. So what is the best response if someone tells you that they are questioning their sexuality or their gender assigned at birth? And how would you go about supporting them?
I think the most important thing that you should say is to thank the person for trusting you enough with that information. Because actually coming out and telling someone something like that is a huge deal. And especially for a young person to do that, they're really afraid of what might be said or how someone might react. So it's really important to thank them for trusting you. And then the next thing that is important is to ask them what they need from you, if they need anything from you, because they might not, they might just need to tell someone. And then if they do need something, do what you can to supply that. A lot of times the biggest thing that our young people face is knowing that someone is there for them, knowing that somebody will care enough to see them through this very difficult time in their life. There are a lot of different things going on with name changes, or how their own family might react to things, or how do they relate to their friends after they change their gender expression, and they need some support. If you can provide that support, that's fantastic. If you don't feel comfortable with it, find a way to refer this young person to someone that can support them, because they're really going to need that.
I will say in our house, we have a very simple rule. And our rule is, if you come out, you have to bake me a cake. And that's it. So we've had kids bake us multiple cakes. It's fine. They come out with a cake and they say, I think I'm bi. I say, great, cake time. No, I think I'm pansexual. Great, cake time. We often forget, and I think it's probably trauma when we were in high school, as teenagers especially, you feel so powerless. People are asking teenagers, be more adult, make more adult decisions, but they're not giving them any power to do so. And so a lot of times we just give the power back to the kid. Okay, so what does that mean for you? What do you need? Do we need to go shopping? Get you some clothes? Okay, let's go get some clothes. I run the parent support group for the GR Pride Center. And a lot of times, so many times I hear parents say, well, what if it's a phase? And my answer is, okay, it's still valid right now. All of life should be a phase. We're always changing and growing. So it should always be in phases. But that doesn't mean it's any less valid right now. So maybe it's a phase. It doesn't matter. Bake a cake. We'll move on.
I really love the cake idea, and I wish I had thought about that when my children came out.
It charged one of my kids to go into culinary school. So now I don't even have to cook as often as I used to. So
Did they cater it to a favorite flavor or just any cake?
any cake. There has been an argument in our house about whether or not sprinkles are gay.
Oh,
Because I have some kids who say, no, sprinkles are very gay. And I have some kids who say I'm gay and I hate sprinkles. So there's a little war going on right now regarding sprinkles.
All right. So one last question for this category here. So for each of you, what does it mean to raise a child gender neutral? What do you think some of the challenges are, and what are some of the benefits?
I do not have very much to say on this topic because I came so late to my own transition. It's only been 4 years, and the majority of my kids are old enough to have grown up the way they grew up. So I have nothing to add. I would like somebody else's perspective on this as well.
Okay. One of the things we do as far as raising our kids gender neutral is that to really find out who your kid is, just let them be. The greatest example is my middle child. Their aunt had come into town when they were born, and their aunt fell in love with them and would put them in beautiful little dresses with frilly little underwear and do their hair pretty and everything. When aunt was not around and I let that kid do whatever that kid wanted, we would go camping and the kid would go out in the rain and come back with a shirt full of lizards. The kid learned absolutely everything about Egypt they could, to the point where we actually had a friend contact the Smithsonian to get them more information because they'd already gone through everything in the library. The easiest way to say you're raising your child gender neutral is just to raise your child neutral. Let your child guide you. Let them tell you what they're interested in, and then share that with them.
Kat, has that influenced how you've gone about naming your children?
Not their birth names, because I think the problem with, naming your child is like you don't know them yet. If you've been pregnant with your child, the person who's pregnant may have a little idea, but you don't really know them yet. And that comes up a lot with parents who are like, my kid wants to be called something else. I gave them their name as a gift. I had certain expectations and thoughts, and I thought this name would be great because I gave it to them as a gift. When you give someone a gift, what they do with it is up to them. It is not conditional. And names hold power. In my culture, we gave our children their babies' names at 100 days. And then when they showed us that they were ready as adults, their adult names. And those were chosen for them, and they've all enjoyed those names. But when they've asked to change their legal name, it hurts a little because you're like, well, I liked the name I picked. But again, I liked it. So it's a way of letting your kid take back their power. They're saying, this name suits me. This name speaks to my power, speaks to who I am. So that's what we call them. It's never been an issue. We had one foster who asked us to call them by a different name. And honestly, my husband forgot what their birth name was because we've just always called them what they asked to be called.
I like what you said about letting your child be whoever they are. Because when I was growing up, I was the one that was bringing home a shirt full of lizards. But then I had to go to school, and I had to have long hair, and I had to wear dresses, and I had to be a girl, and it just wasn't me. What I really wanted to do was go get some more lizards. So that's a very good idea. Just let your kids do what they want to do.
And we've had people misgender my kids from an early age because I let them dress the way they want. So they'd be like, oh, your son. And I'm like, it's my daughter. She just prefers short hair, jeans, and a t-shirt. So whatever.
Absolutely.
All the way up to
several of my, sorry, go ahead.
No, all the way up to teenagehood, there's been people who don't quite get it right. And it's like,
Yeah. Several of my adult daughters like jeans and a t-shirt. They never wear dresses. They never put their hair up fancy. They don't wear makeup. So that's just how they want to be.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing so much on that. I've learned a lot already. So we'll move on to adoption and parenting. So it's often said that adoption is noble and adopted children are so lucky and blessed, but adoption is loss and adoption is trauma. So you must adjust your parenting methods accordingly. So my question is, how are some ways trauma manifests, and what is your parenting advice to address the trauma in the foster care and adoption?
I think, go ahead, Carrie.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one thing that we know in the adoption community is that trauma manifests itself in behaviors within children all the time. And so we have to like look at what their behaviors are trying to tell us. And oftentimes, I think, you know, we as parents want to respond to behaviors as if it's a willful action by the child to be defiant or to be, you know, expressing anger. But really what they're trying to communicate is what they can't do in that moment and what's going on inside their brain. And so it just manifests itself in so many different ways in their bodies. But really that behavioral stuff that comes out day in and day out is where you see a lot of the trauma of the loss. And I think, you know, another thing about the adoption community is that again, like you said in the beginning there, it's, you know, people say, oh, it's so noble, you know, these children are so blessed, you know, this and that and the other, but but we really lose that grief component. No one grieves the losses that are already there in adoption. There's always loss. Adoption comes from loss, immediately from loss. And so I think, you know, we have to really honor that piece and work through that with the child, with the birth moms, with the adoptive families, like all across the board, everyone involved needs to address that grief and that loss piece.
I agree wholeheartedly. Behavior is communication. That's always a big thing we talk about, you know, instead of joining in the frustration when your child is having a challenging behavior, it's so much more beneficial if we could slow ourselves down a bit and become curious about what is behind this behavior. What is this behavior trying to tell me? You know, kids don't inherently want to do bad. They don't want to be in trouble or be the bad person. That's not like how we're born, you know. So and then as far as parenting, I think so much of the time we're working toward correcting behavior management, time ins, time outs, all of these different methods, you know, 1, 2, 3 magic. There's so many different ones out there that are gonna solve all your problems. But I think relationship is the key. I think it's so important that we create a safe space that our children can come to when they're having those hard times, and that we can mirror, you know, if they're sad, we can mirror sadness back to them, and we can let them know it's okay to be sad and that we're sad with them, you know, and we can work through it together, that they can have somebody to regulate off of instead of just being sent away. I know I did plenty of timeouts early on in my parenting. It's like, go away until you can act right, you know, and I've learned that is, you know, maybe not optimal for most kids. Sometimes they really need to be brought in and know that we're going to support them even when it's ugly. And then I always like to transition it to how do I want to be treated, you know, when I'm having a hard time. So I'm getting older in my years, and, you know, sometimes I can get emotional about things and I'm not even 100% sure what's going on. I don't want somebody to kind of, you know, be angry at me for feeling the way that I feel, or for maybe acting in the way that I, you know, I'm not most proud of sometimes. So, yeah.
Most of my kids, my foster kids that have come to me, were teenagers. And so not only did they come to me with trauma, there was often physical problems, and you've got years of whether it's emotional abuse or physical abuse. And to understand, you have to understand that with abuse and with kids who are brought up in trauma, they learn to survive it. So the things they do seem, you know, in normal circumstances, like messed up, but that's how they stayed sane. And so in our family, a lot of it was teaching kids to check in with themselves, which is something a lot of adults don't even do. We have a wheel at home that we put up whenever we have discussions. We have weekly family check-ins, and the wheel will have emotions on the outside, and it has the basic emotions: sad, angry, happy, excited. But then it goes down and there's more detailed. So they can get in there and understand that, yes, it's anger, but where's it coming from? And we walk through it until they find out, well, it's shame. We had a kid who came to us with severe OCD, and their parent was quite literally like, well, good luck with that. And we just sat down and said, okay, what is it that bothers you? Well, I can't have my clothes washed a weird way. Okay, here's your basket. Nobody touches this basket, but you can wash your clothes however works for you. And you just handed them back that power, rather than saying, no, you'll get over it, or it's fine. You give them back the power to say, if they need things done a certain way, then that's fine. Do it that way. That works for you. She wasn't taking showers. She wasn't taking care of herself hygienically. So you find out why. What's the problem? The problem is I don't like the sense of this. I have sensory issues. Okay, then let's find the things that work with you. And I do have to say, since we moved to Grand Rapids, I have found Grand Rapids Public Schools amazing in helping us with our kids who have sensory issues or trauma. They're always willing to work with us and find a way to make things work with the kids. And that's really important too, to know that you have that support in the schools.
Absolutely. Thank you. So what advice do you have for maintaining a relationship with your child's first family?
I think that's it's a complex issue because you don't know all the dynamics sometimes. So the approach that we've taken in my family is that, well, one, what I've known and learned over time is that kids want to have a connection of some sort with where they come from, right? They want to know that curiosity never goes away, that longing, that desire. And I've, worked in foster care long before I was a foster parent, and every kid that I've ever known has always tried, when they turn 18, they go back, they try to find their family. And so I think my approach has been, as a family, is to foster that as much as I can while my children are in my home and are young, and to really honor where they've come from. And so we talk very openly in my family about first mommies and, where they came from and who their first mommies are. And I, answer questions that I have a strong belief that if children are asking a question, they're ready for that answer. And I find that sometimes my kids will come to me with a really profound, big question about, birth mom or birth situation, or why they're with me now. And it'll be a really big question for like a 5-year-old. And there's this thing in my gut that goes like, oh, am I ready? Am I ready for this? And I find that I answer it, and then they scurry off and they run and they play. They were ready for that question. They were ready for that response, but that's all they needed. And so we don't have to have like a big, long discussion about it. Answer their question, meet them where they're at. And so I think it's really important to just foster that as best you can. And that if parents, my stance is that if parents are, in safe places and doing well, I maintain relationships with birth moms. I work very hard at that myself, just to know how they're doing, to be a support to them, to continue to let them know that I am honoring them and talking about them in our home. And so I try really hard to foster it as much as I can. I think it's really important for the kids to have a sense of who they are, where they come from, what their identities are. A lot in our family too, there's a lot of culture. We have a very diverse family. And so I think that that's really important as well, to really honor all of that culture within their heritage.
Yeah, like Renee, we've from day one always had these conversations. So I remember pretty vividly when I was around 12 in middle school, one of my really close friends found out she was adopted. And I remember how earth-shattering that was for me. I never really understood what that could have meant for her, like as far as having experienced that. But I know for me, knowing this, my friend was adopted and she looked like her mom and dad. And there's all these questions that didn't make sense to my 12-year-old brain, but never really, wanting to have that be the case for my kids. I wanted them to have these conversations so they didn't hit a wall at some point where, they had to discover that their whole existence to that point wasn't what they thought that it was. And too, we've worked very hard to maintain relationships with birth families. Some are in healthier places than others. And kind of our motto is always, if it's not harming the kids in any way, then that's what we go for. And then if it does, then we can kind of back off. But I've always tried to stay in contact even when, we haven't been able to keep the kids in contact at times. So I think it's just a huge part of who they are. And ironically enough, as my kids have turned 18 and 19 and 20 and all of these years, there's not been a huge pull. None of them have gone to meet them yet. And I kind of attribute that, at least in our case, to the conversations that we had, in the early years. It wasn't like, I'm going to turn 18 and then bust out of here and go find these people that you've kept from me, I guess, so all their questions, they still have questions. There's things that we'll never have answers to, but at least if you can provide them as, much of an outline of their history, then it just helps them to be more fulfilled, I think.
My situation is obviously different. Most of the kids that we've taken in were teenagers who were either kicked out or ran away. So their situations were not good to begin with. I always contact the parents immediately, and I let them know, I have your child is safe. And from there on, I'm doing a lot of work, because once they're teenagers and they're struggling and there's so much trauma, teaching them first to take care of themselves and that they're okay is really difficult. So we often talk about how boundaries are healthy. Having a boundary means you want a relationship with someone. When you put a boundary out, you're saying, I want a relationship with you, and this is how I need to have it. So we've even at times driven our kids 2.5 hours to do things with their biological family. Because if that's what they want to do and they want to see their family, then that's fine. We have no problem with that. We also try to teach them that, if it is an abusive situation, if there is trauma there, it is okay to first and foremost set up boundaries. That, you always have a way out. Somebody's driving you who can drive you back home, so you're never really trapped there or anything like that. But I do often try to get to the point where they can reconnect. And I found that the teenagers who do reconnect do so only on a adult level, where they have now established themselves and now they are comfortable having that adult relationship with their parents, because they are working, they're on their own, they are taking care of themselves, and they can have that safety in those boundaries.
I have something similar to add. I divorced my children's biological father when my youngest was very young, only 2 or 3 years old. So he never knew his biological father. And then dad moved away thousands of miles, so there was no way to visit. He didn't try to reach out to the children at all. So it was really difficult for my son to have anything to do with his father, so he didn't. So I had to have some of those, this is what your father was like conversations, that he liked to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. He read Star Trek books. I had to just tell him about his father. And then to make it even more difficult, his dad passed away 6 years ago. So my youngest child never got to know his biological father. So I have to keep having conversations. Just every now and again, I'll just drop, oh yeah, he likes to drink. He used to drink Mountain Dew all the time. Just anything to help my son relate to who his father was.
Thank you. All right, so we will move on to education versus privacy. So friends and strangers alike will ask insensitive questions at times based on the little knowledge that they have and the stereotypes that they know. So how important is it to maintain the privacy of your child and their story? And this can be open for everyone, because I feel like this is a a broad question.
I'm going to say that I always let the child take the lead. You don't treat a child differently as a human being just because they are your child. They are allowed privacy. When I go to the hospital with my kids, I will ask, do you want me in the room or do you want me to leave? If they want to go to therapy, they don't have to talk about it with me. That's their therapist. It's fine. If I need to go to the school and tell the school some things, I'll say, how much do you want people to know? Do you want the teachers to know, everything, or do they only need to know you have sensory issues? We're not going to go any deeper than that. So I think it's very important for a child, especially if a child is questioning, they're still figuring themselves out. The last thing they need is for me to announce to the world who I think they have become or are becoming, because then that's hemming them in. So I always let the child take the lead in how much they want to tell people and why.
I have also done the same thing. I ask my children, do you want the school to know about your sexuality? If you do not, I won't say anything. If you do, it is up to you to let them know. Or if you don't feel comfortable telling them and you want me to, I can do that. When my 2 youngest were going to high school, that is when I transitioned. So I did prepare them a little bit by saying, whoever that I am going to go and talk to, the principal or assistant principal, will assume that I am your dad. I can either correct them and tell that I am transgender, or we can just let it stay at that I am your dad, even though we all know that I am not your biological dad. And most of them chose to keep it like that. The principals called me dad, and that was fine.
think in the foster care and adoption world, this idea of privacy is very similar in the sense of like it is the kid's story, right? And just honoring that it's their story. What's fascinating and has become kind of a little bit of a known joke in the adoption world, in the foster care world, is that perfect strangers will ask you all of their details all of the time. At Meyer, you get it when you're checking out in the checkout lane. Oh, is this your real kid? Or, of course it's a real kid. Like, what do you, right in front of your child, is this your real kid? And so it becomes a little bit of a snarky joke, but it's just very, very important to honor that this is their story. And just because, maybe I'm fostering, I've even had family and friends will say to me when I take a placement, oh, what's their story? What happened to them? It's none of your business. It's their story, and it's private, and it's, and as they grow older, if they want to tell their story, they tell their story. But it's fascinating to me in this community of adoption and foster care, just how much people feel like they're entitled to know something about your children. Like they feel like it's their story to know as well. And I think we have to really advocate for keeping that private.
I will say that early on in my journey, I didn't recognize the value of the privacy piece. So I made some blunders early on. And I think the moment that I opened my eyes was when my eyes were opened, is when one of my, preschool, young elementary aged children started sharing somebody that knew had come to our home's story with just some random person, in a store. And then I was like, oh, that sounds really bad, to sit here and hear it from the mouth of one of your babes, you're like, okay, well, we need to fix how we're doing things. So, it was important that I got educated on, because it's in the moment, you just never know what you're going to be asked. We have 10 children. So I've been asked so many crazy questions, are they all yours? Are they all real brothers and sisters? Do you have a daycare? There's all these different things. And, I have to kind of be a little bit prepared. Mine are older now, but when they were younger, I had to have some kind of preset question or answers to their questions. Otherwise it could, I could answer in a frustrated way or not know what to say. So, it was important that we kind of figured things out before we went out into the real world.
Do any of you else find that you've done that, where you've almost practiced a response to potential questions?
I know my family, we have a very weird sense of humor. We're very much an Addams family kind of family. So we will easily make jokes about things. At one point, I was going into the hospital. I had kidney stones and my kid had taken me in. And my kid is assigned female at birth and has only recently come out as gender queer. And so at that time, they're like, I'm female. And when my husband came up to the hospital, the nurse told him, your son did such a good job taking care of your wife. And so now we tease my daughter every once in a while. We'll be like, oh, you won't even cook for us? Your brother Arthur would. We just make jokes about things. There were times I was at the mall with a total of 8 children, all 11 and under. And people would be like, are those all your kids? And I'd be like, no, I just keep grabbing them and nobody says anything. So I'm just going from store to store with kids and they just keep adding them on. And people don't know at that point. When you make a joke like that, they're just like, wait, okay, I'm not going to ask anymore. And they back off because what else are they going to do?
That is absolutely how I do things as well. Make a joke about it. And I think it's funny that you mentioned the Addams family, because they are just as quirky as they care to be, and they have no apologies for society whatsoever. And I love it.
But they're also one of the most supportive families. They
Yes.
always support their children.
They do. And they all love each other. It's fantastic.
Thank you. So this is somewhat similar in that line of thinking, but how can you respond to well-meaning but ignorant questions in that moment?
I think for me, it depends on where I'm at in that exact moment in my own mood, because I have, I have like this very snarky side if I'm kind of rushed or, and I can get offended so quickly, and I'll put them in their place, and just say something real snarky and rude. But then there are times I think like, okay, maybe this is a learning opportunity. And, if I'm in the right frame of mind and maybe I've got a few extra minutes, let me educate you a little bit. Let me talk to you a little bit about when you say things like this in front of my children, when you ask in front of my children, are they your real children? what does that do to them? What is that message to them? And how that compounds all their traumas that they already have. And so I think that it's really important to just to check ourselves and kind of see where we're at. And so I think both of those opportunities are a teaching moment for people who, you know, ask the questions. It's just it's handled in a different way.
I know I have business cards that if I get a sense that somebody's genuinely interested in becoming like a foster or adoptive parent, like you can kind of sometimes tell, not always. Some people are just nosy, but you know, if I get a sense, I just give them a business card and say, hey, shoot me an email. We can set up a time to talk, because I don't always want to have a long, elongated conversation. You know, sometimes you can. Sometimes you're in a position like Renee said, it just really depends on your mood, your bandwidth, how much of it you may have left for that day, and then you know, the moment. If you've got 6 kids, 5 and under, going in 10 different directions, you know, you're like, can't talk. So yeah, I think, you know, it's kind of recognizing who your audience is, and then going from there.
That's what I was going to add. Recognize who your audience is. Most of the time, my go-to is educate. But if I can immediately tell that someone is asking a very personal question just because, you know, they want to get titillated somehow, they get the snarky response. My go-to is education.
You do learn quite quickly. I raised my siblings, and then I raised cousins, and then I raised my kids, and then other people's kids. So I've been raising kids a really long time, and I've been doing other advocacy work, and you learn pretty quickly the people who are asking questions just to poke. They want to try and tear down whatever your reasoning is and everything. And I just don't have the energy for that. For that, honestly, the best thing is just to go, okay. You're not arguing, you're not validating, you're just going, okay, that's what you think. Cool. That's it. Because you need to stop it right there and move on. For education, especially because I run the parents group now, a lot of times I've had parents who their kids have come out as like 4-year-olds, and I've had parents who it's like, my kid's 30 and they've just come out, and they seriously don't know what to do. And unfortunately, the great thing about the internet is you can put anything on there, you can find anything on there. But the bad thing about the internet is you can find anything on there. So I understand that a lot of people who are curious and really seriously don't know that their questions are inappropriate, they go on the internet and they're going to get mad people. So I try to create a safe space in support groups and things like that, where I'm like, no, if you seriously just don't know, then ask. If you just want to honestly learn, I will tell you. I will also let you know that, you know, okay, I'll answer that question for you, but that is an inappropriate question. Please don't ask that of your child, you know, so that people can learn. Because there are people who they seriously do not know that they're inappropriate.
Yeah, that education piece is huge. Charles, it looked like you had something to say. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, there was 2 things actually. Walking away is definitely an answer. Absolutely. And if you don't have the bandwidth, or you feel like this person is not actually engaging you to get information, walk away. But then the other thing that Kat just said, oh darn, I can't remember what it was now. I can't remember what the second piece was, and Kat just said it too. Well, I'll come back.
The other thing I was going to say is I always find it kind of humorous that there's just really only just a handful of questions that get repetitively asked, at least in my experience. So it's like this funny thing of, do you take a class? Like, does the general public like take a class that we don't know about, and they are given like 5 questions that they can ask people that look like a different type of family than what they're used to seeing? Like, I don't know. So it does help you though to come up with some good answers when you're asked the same things on repeat. So
I remember what I was going to say. Kat mentioned letting people know that you're open to answering questions, but if it is highly inappropriate, you let them know that. You know, then you give the answer to the question. Like, especially with a gender transition type of a thing, everybody wants to know about your bits, and that is none of their business. So, you know, depending on how comfortable I feel answering that question, I will always preface it with, that is really none of your business. I am a complete stranger to you. You shouldn't be asking that.
Yeah. And again, similarly, in that line of thinking, how do you handle family members who are ignorant or not supportive? Do you attempt to educate them? And when do you draw the line and distance yourself from family?
Again, I'm going to say it's where boundaries come in. Myself, I came from a background that was not healthy, and I really didn't want to put my children through that, but at the same time, I didn't want to take away the possibility of a grandmother in their life. So we quite simply told my mother, this is how you need to behave around our kids. And the first time she didn't, her thing was swearing like a sailor. We just picked up the kids and we left. And she got mad and she said, well, then don't bring them over anymore. And so we didn't for 2 months. Then we got the call. I'm so sorry. I'll be better. So it didn't really change a whole lot. My mother is still somebody who has racist, homophobic issues going on, but she knew how to behave around our kids. And then when our kids got to the age where they understood, they could choose for themselves. We have never been the people to force our kid, give grandma a kiss. No, go give grandma a kiss. We've never done that. And my grandparents who helped raise me were the same way. They were very wonderful about that. They never forced my kids to kiss them or hug them or anything. It was always, they know. I don't care if they're 2 years old. They know their boundary. So we would put up boundaries, and I may have waited too long to actually cut out certain people in my life, but I also made sure that they were behaving around my kids, and my kids could get to a point where they were old enough to say, I don't want that person in my life anymore. And then it's up to them.
One of the significant others that came into the family not too long ago would tell jokes that simply were not funny. They were just cut downs. And I had a little chat with him and I said, you can't say those sorts of things. When you are the only person in the room laughing, everybody else is just kind of side-eyeing you. Like, what did you just say? You're not being funny. You are just being hurtful. And you need to stop doing that around my family. Because he was doing that around, the adult kids and the kids that were still younger. So I had to tell him about that.
I think sometimes too, some of my kids have some special needs and behaviors that go alongside with those special needs. And I think that that's a tricky one too, again, you got to work really hard on those boundaries and educating our family members as well, because I believe, at least in my family, I believe that my extended family wants to know the proper things. They want to support, they want to understand, yet they simply don't, so when my child, I'll talk about my child's brain and the way that she operates and the way that her, the way that she acts out and what that all means. And they nod and they get it and they say it. And then when they see her doing those things, they resort back to some old kind of school parenting styles of their own. Oh, well, you just got to whoop her a couple of times or something. And I'm like, no. That's not how we operate in this house, because this is not willful behavior. She's not doing this intentionally. She has a disability. And so they just can't, because they can't see it, they don't believe it. And I think they want to try. So I agree with Kat. I mean, you just have to set those boundaries and you have to say, this is how we parent. This is how we're responding to our children because of their needs. And if you can't be on board with that, then we'll separate ourselves from it. And that's okay to do.
I do want to just add, because you were saying kids with special needs. I worked with developmentally disabled for quite a long time, and it came in really handy because my middle child, we thought they were deaf when they were first born because they were not reacting. We took them to be checked several times, and that's when we found out they were on the autistic spectrum. At the time, Asperger's, which we no longer use, but learning, rather than trying to make people who are non-neurotypical or your children who are non-neurotypical fit society, you learn to understand how they think. So learn how to communicate on their level rather than forcing them to mask or behave a specific way because you feel that's more socially acceptable. And once you're able to do that, you don't get so frazzled. You don't start thinking it's like, oh, they're acting up. It's like, no, this is their communication style, or this is them needing to shut down. Some of our kids, when they put their hands over their face, they cannot handle it. Then you leave them alone and let them write to you. And that's just part of it. And you have to let other people know. It's like, no, they're not upset. They're not ignoring you. This is just how they need to communicate right now, or they are overwhelmed right now.
Okay, so one big question for everybody on the panel, with all the experience you have with family and kids, how do you balance maintaining family and friend relationships and keeping your health and well-being in a good place with everything that you have going on?
It's exhausting. I mean, yeah, I think we are all sitting here saying we are raising big families, and we have big families, and I'm sure we have other things going on as well, as far as jobs and careers and lives. And so it is constantly a balancing act, and it is, it's just prioritizing, prioritizing. And I continue, I shared in the beginning with the panel that my 3 youngest children are all 1 year apart from each other. And so we're just in a busy phase of life. And I keep saying that this is a busy chapter. And I say that to friends and to family who don't understand why we don't come around so much, because we're just in a busy chapter. And this isn't going to last forever. It doesn't mean that I don't want to maintain those relationships with those people that are important to me as well. But right now, my focal point has to be my children and raising them in the best way that I can. And so, I find that I have to just, again, going back to the boundaries issue, and how do you establish the boundaries you need and make the priorities that you need.
I think it's so important. Oh, go ahead.
In the micro level of caring for ourselves as parents, my 2 youngest here and I all know that when any one of us is in need of a break, that we just say, I can't do this right now, and we walk away. And then we do whatever it is that we need to do to work on our self-care. So I think training our children to be able to focus on their own self-care is very important. And the best way to do that, of course, is by example. I know that you need help right now, but I just can't. Give me a little bit of time. I need to do X, Y, Z. I will come back to this. So we have to model that for them.
I will say what I did a lot, I mean, from the time the children were really young to teenagers, is I would just do everything. I would have them do things with me. If I wanted to start a meditation practice, I had them come and practice with me. When we lived in mid-Michigan, we would go to a place to meditate, and I'd bring the kids, and they were very nice because they knew my kids were trying to be quiet for 45 minutes, but little kids don't like being quiet for 45 minutes. So we learned walking meditation, where the kids could then talk about the plants while we're walking and everybody else is meditating. So I would just take them with me. I missed working in the theater. I started taking my kids with me backstage while I was working in the theater. So a lot of it was just letting them do things with me. Was not only, and I found it was not only a great way for me to get some stress relief, but they learn things so much faster. If I'm making dinner, I'm like, come on, you're going to come help. You're going to find me this. We're going shopping in the grocery store. You need to find this for me. And you need to find this for me. And just, it keeps them active, and they're also learning, because they're learning their shapes and their colors and their names and things like that. But then they're also learning how mom learns to take care of herself. Also, because I do also suffer from some mental illness myself, and I have CPTSD, they see that I model with my husband that if I'm having a hard time, I can say that. I can say, this is not a good mental health day. Mommy's having a bad brain day. So normally I can hear all of you talk at once. Today we can't. So today we take one at a time. And so they then know it's okay. It is okay to have bad brain days. It is okay to have days where I can't take on as much. I need more help.
Carrie, any thoughts on that topic? I know I saw you unmute at one point.
Yeah, I was going to start to say just with the whole health and well-being piece, as my life has gotten more challenging, my youngest son has autism, and he's pretty profoundly autistic. So it's puberty, it's all kinds of fun right here, right now. But and he's largely nonverbal. He has some words, and then he definitely can communicate, just not in the back and forth like you and I are doing now. But so I have been learning a lot better about saying no to things, and then also trying not to feel guilty and not feeling like I have to explain why. Those are things I am learning. haven't arrived by any means, but it's something that I'm tossing around and I'm practicing and I'm getting comfortable with it. And I'm also realizing, we see a lot about self-care, and I'm also realizing that 5 minutes sitting outside watching the birds come to the feeder, it feeds my soul. Like there's a lot of things that aren't a weekend getaway with the girlfriends, which, I would love right now, but that's just not practical. So I've had to lower the bar and again, become comfortable with this is what I'm able to do right now and finding creative ways, and honestly, self-care is saying no too. So yeah, lots going on here learning because of necessity. And then COVID really did make a lot of changes for me too. So yeah.
I think I was just going to add to that too. I think another piece of self-care is finding your people. And so, Carrie knows this well. The way that we know each other is through adoption support groups and AFSN specifically. And I think finding your people, finding your village, and having the people that support you and understand you and see you and really know what your family is like and understands it and is walking alongside you, and just really, making those relationships a priority.
It makes all the difference, Renee. You're so right. Oh my goodness, just a place where you could be yourself and your family can be who they are.
Right. Yeah. And you're among families that look like your family. And that's important for our kids, for sure.
I was actually just going to ask about external support. So Renee, thank you for for touching on that. Does anyone else have anything they would like to contribute as far as what external or community support helps that you use to help with that health and well-being of you and your family?
For me, I greatly appreciate spending time outside. So I've been volunteering a lot with Friends of Grand Rapids Parks, and I get outside and I plant trees and I hang around people, and it's kind of a time away from being a parent for me, and it's also rejuvenating for me to be outside. So I make sure that I'm able to do that in any way. Sometime, a couple times a week, I can get outside and do something. If I can't get together with friends of Grand Rapids Parks, then I will just take a walk by some trees somewhere, or go to the beach, or anything. So being outside is big for me.
I will say with support, a lot of times what it is that we need different support. It is great to have support for the entire family, but what I need is not the same thing as what my kids need. So it's also being able to be open and honest enough with your kids so they can tell you. The internet's huge for support right now. I mean, with COVID, a lot of the Grand Rapids Pride Center had to put a lot of the support groups online. So we're doing Zoom meetings, we're in Discord. And I can't tell you how many parents are like, what's Discord? And I have to explain it to them. So I'm like, your kid already has it. I know they do. They've already got it. And it's a world out there. I mean, we're lucky in that my husband works in computer security, but not everybody has that support. So you have to be able to be open and honest. I've always told my kids, you have to friend me on these things. You have to friend me on all of these things. Yes, I am fully aware that they probably have another Facebook or another Instagram I'm not a part of, but the fact that they know I've got their back. And if I see them post something online that's inappropriate, and I'll say, hey, you so know better than that, that allows them to come to me when they do need help. Because that's the big thing is that I have their back. They're becoming adults. Yes, venture out into the world, start doing things. But if you need the support, then I'm here and I've got your back. And so knowing that they may have a support system that I'm not a part of, and that's fine. I don't have to be a part of all of their support systems. If they just want to talk to other people that they feel like themselves, then do that.
I just want to add to, as a behavioral health therapist, I have to say that, I think we have to work on the stigma sometimes that kids feel if they do want to attend therapy or seek out therapy. And I think we have to, as a society, just need to, get rid of the stigma around mental health issues, and that it's okay to seek therapy and to look for therapy. And I think, again, supporting our kids and having that be common language in your home, that therapy is just common language, and that everyone can have their own therapist, and even moms and dads and parents, we all need, therapists as well. So I think it's really important to just make that common language in your home.
Yes, thank you for adding that. I have a therapist and two of my kids have therapists, and they can talk about their session or not as they choose. I sometimes share some of the things that I talk about with my therapist. Most of the time I don't, because they're the kids, you don't share everything with them. But yeah, it is acceptable in this house, and even the children that have already moved out, to have a therapist. I have encouraged several of them to go get one. So thank you very much for mentioning that, Renee.
Yeah, all of our kids have seen therapists. A few of mine have had to do, the very first foster kid I had, I actually got because they were in the hospital for an overdose, and they did not want to go home. And DHS said, will you take them? And I said, yes. So not only do we, I've never told my kids they have to tell me it goes on therapy. I'll ask them how it went. How do you feel? Sometimes if they cry a lot, like me, I'll get them a Powerade because you dehydrate, but also to let them know that if a therapist doesn't feel right for you, if you feel that therapist is not listening or is too bossy or doesn't understand you, it is perfectly fine to say, mom, dad, parent, I'd rather see somebody else. Can we look for somebody else? That's fine. Because like any kind of therapy, massage therapy, mental therapy, you got to have the right therapist for the right person. So it is perfectly fine to say, I need somebody else, that you can get the help you need.
Thank you for saying that, Kat, because in my practice, I always tell new clients, particularly children and teenagers, I tell them, this is like a job interview. The first time that you're meeting with me, you're interviewing me for this job. And so you have to make sure that you are feeling in control, that you feel like I'm a good match for you. And if it doesn't, that doesn't hurt my feelings. I'm not going to be upset by that. I will help you find somebody else who will be a good match for you. And it's okay to say that this doesn't feel right for you. So that's an important piece, Kat. Thanks for saying it.
Absolutely. Thank you. So as we reflect on these journeys, and we've mentioned a little bit before, but what pieces of knowledge do you wish you knew earlier on in the journey? And what advice do you wish you had had earlier?
Well, for me, the biggest piece is if I had known that gender is a social construction, then I would not have done what society told me to do and lived my life as a female for such a long time. However, in hindsight, of course, if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have all of my children. But I would have also raised my children differently and not insisted that my girls wear dresses and have their hair done, and that the boys play sports and all of the things that society says boys are supposed to do. So if I had that piece of information as I was growing up, then my kids would have grown up differently as well.
I will say for me, I think what I wish I would have known was that it is all right to need help. It just is. I wasted a lot of time when I was younger thinking someday I'm going to get off certain meds. Someday I'm not going to need therapists. Someday. And I still have people who will tell me, well, it's horrible that you think you have to be on medication the rest of your life. My brain chemistry is not right because of trauma when I was a child. There's now something literally physically wrong with my brain. So it is okay. There's like a comic my kid has, if you don't have any store-bought serotonin's fine. Store-bought is fine. Because once I was able to accept that it's fine that I need these things to keep myself in check, that's part of my self-care. I'm able to tell my kids who are worried about it. It's like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. It's just some people have to have coffee in the morning. You have to have Zoloft in the morning. That's all. And it's fine. So that self-acceptance, I think, is so, so important. And I think, unfortunately, most of us don't get it before we have kids. We kind of learn it by showing our kids and be like, no, our kids are awesome. They should just accept themselves for who they are. And then you go, oh, wait. Yeah, I should probably accept myself too, huh? So I think that would have been super helpful in the beginning.
I guess I would say maybe for me in my situation, again, you know, having worked in social work and child welfare specifically for 25 years, and then at a year about 15 is when I went into fostering myself, and I've been doing that for 10 years now. And I think, I guess being a little, I wish I had known then that it wasn't going to be like what I did for work. I mean, my heart was in it in such a different way, and I always felt like, oh, I loved the kids that I worked with in the foster care system. So I always felt like this was just going to be the same thing. I was just going to bring them home instead. Instead of going to work to see them, I'll bring them home. And it would be the same amount of love. But obviously this is, you know, in your home, it's your whole heart that goes in, and it's just in a different way. And so I think, I guess I wish I would have known a little bit more how much that journey was going to impact me, and how heavy that was going to feel, and how heavy in a good way. I mean, just how deep that love was going to be. It's funny, I tell people who know me really well, they know that I never intended to be an adoptive parent. I never intended to adopt kids. I really believe in foster care. I really believe in being a safe haven for kids when they need it. And I never anticipated being an adoptive family. And here I am, you know, 4 kids out of foster care later in my home now. So it's just, you know, kind of funny how, you know, opening up your heart to that is so big.
I think in our case, I think I wish that I would have realized early on that I wasn't taking in these little people to fix, that they weren't just these little broken objects, and my job was to fix. Because I can definitely wholeheartedly admit that I adopted because I'm a fixer. You know, I'm going to fix all these broken things and help. And part of that journey for me has been to learn that it doesn't have to be perfect, that, you know, we can all have, because what is perfect, right? Like, what is perfect? But like allowing other people to see your vulnerabilities, or allowing other people to see your weaknesses, even, I'll go so far as to say, I think I had one of my children that was a preteen age that just said to me one day, "You just don't get it, Mom. You're good at everything." And I was just like, oh, if that's the impression that I've given to you for the last 7 years, I have miserably failed, because I get so much wrong, you know, but I wasn't letting even them see all of my own shortcomings. So I've become a lot more transparent in that, but it would have been easier to learn it as a child than as an adult.
Another thing that I wish that I had learned was that I was a very special, important, wonderful human being. If I had learned that growing up, then I would have been able to manifest that for my children. It's difficult to tell someone how wonderful they are when you haven't experienced that yourself. First time someone told me they were proud of me, I was 45 years old. So I think that if I had learned how to look at myself with a different lens, and to see how wonderful that I was, I would have also been able to teach my older children how wonderful they are.
Thank you for that. This is a little bit in line with the similar question, but what is one thing that you'd like everyone that's listening to our conversation to take away from today?
I think probably the one that comes to mind most is be yourself. Whoever that is, just be yourself, and don't let society change you because society tells you that it's wrong somehow. Be who you are. And if you are around people that don't appreciate you for who you are, walk away and find people that do.
Yeah, and I think, you know, tagging along on that, Charles, I think too, to say, like, let your family be who they are. And I think, you know, again, like, you know, instilling that in your children, that we are our family, and our family, you know, our family again is quite diverse. And so when we go places, my children recognize that people look at us and notice us. And One is just they're loud kids, but my children notice that. And so, teaching them and instilling in them that this is our family and there's a lot to be proud of in our family. And, my kids, our family name is Carr, and we call ourselves the Car Crash. And the kids kind of, they have little chants about it, like little rhymes that they do about being the car. They have some pride in who they are as a family. And I think instilling that is really important.
I think for me, it's just learn as much as you can about people who are different than you. I've spent most of my life trying to understand myself through other people. And I've always taken my kids on this journey with me, different religions, different cultures. And the more you learn about how much is in this world, you find that the basics are the same among everyone. So it doesn't really matter. So let your kids explore the world, let them explore who they are, and learn with them about all the different kinds of people, because you'll find they're not as different as you think. Whether your kid is questioning their religion, their gender, their sexuality, and it doesn't matter because they're still that same person. Who we are at the core is who we are. Rather than so many people think their children are going to be mini me's, or, you put these expectations on them because you see them liking something. Don't do that. Let them explore, let them play, let them discover who they are. And if you as a parent are like, I never got a chance to do that, it's not too late. You can go do that too.
I think it's just really important to keep an open mind and not judge things. It's like we're just always here to learn, or we should be anyways, I think. What do you say? The more I learn, the less I know, like that whole saying of, so I don't know. It's very important for me to be as least judgmental. I'm just so accepting of people, and I can't say that I was that way 20 years ago, because I've just learned so much about that and how important it is. And then when you're on the receiving end too of somebody else's judgments, you quickly learn that's pretty sucky. So yeah, just be accepting and open-minded, judgment-free.
You. My almost 5-year-old and I had a conversation about that the other day, because she said something about, oh, that's different, you. And I said, different? It's just different. You could just say, that's different from me. And she said, oh, okay. And then we moved on. So thank you for sharing that. So one of the questions that was asked in our chat was, what are some of the books that you would recommend and movies that you would recommend that would help expand further on this topic, or that have helped you along in your journey?
I guess I would say for me personally, a lot of my go-to things are centering on attachment and the loss and grief around adoption. And I think really kind of understanding that better and educating people around that piece, I think has been really important for me. And I think also one of my kiddos has fetal alcohol syndrome. And I think that has been learning different ways to parent has been invaluable to me with that, in that regard, and understanding that as a brain difference and a brain disability, and that it's organic, and that we have to parent very differently and very parenting to the brain as opposed to the behavior. And so I think that that's been really valuable. Shifting the Paradigm is a book about fetal alcohol syndrome and how to shift the way that you think about your child's behavior, because you're not going to change their brain. And so you have to adapt and you have to change. And so that book has been just really a lifeline.
Not directly related to our topics of discussion, but still a very profound book for me, was Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces, and one of his myth books. I can't remember the exact title, but we are all the same. Yes, we're different, but we're all the same. Like Kat said earlier, there are so many basic things that every human experiences, that every human needs. And Joseph Campbell's take was through the lens of religion, and so many of the religions have the same basic tenets: be good to each other, don't lie, don't steal, things like that. But it comes down to the same sort of thing in society. We all need food, we all need shelter, we all need people that care about us in our lives. It doesn't matter what we look like, it doesn't matter who we like to be with, it doesn't matter what we do in our spare time. We all need those same basic things. So reading some of Joseph Campbell's books really opened my eyes to the differences and sameness of all of us.
There's a few go-tos that I like to recommend in the adoption and foster care world. Karen Purvis's The Connected Child. Any kind of book is kind of like, a therapist, right? Like some chew up the meat, spit out the bones, that kind of thing. Like you're going to get some good and some bad. And some books are going to be life altering for one family and make no difference in another family. So I'll give you just a few of the top ones. That's one of them. And then The Great Behavior Breakdown by Brian Post. Both are really just good at that connection and parenting outside the box, not your traditional parenting models of behaviors and consequences and things like that don't typically work so well anyway. And then Kirk Martin, he has his organization is called Celebrate Calm. He's a speaker, but he does have CDs and stuff, but he's hilarious to listen to. Just meeting kids where they're at, and just that sense of humor, I think, is so important sometimes that we don't lose that when we're parenting, because then we're just grumpy and that's no fun for anyone. So that's what I got.
For me, I always have to keep in mind the intersectionality of things. My family is mixed race, so we made sure from the very beginning, these are things that we discuss. We just do. We discuss things that they don't learn in school. And at some point, I actually would come up, usually around 5th grade, kids get the Native American chapter. And I would come in and explain to, teachers, my kids know what you're teaching is not completely accurate, but they also know chain of command. So they will not interrupt you and be rude, but they will come up to you afterwards. And some schools even asked me to come in and talk. So that's nice. But what helps me with parenting is I really wanted to make sure I stuck to, we have in my tribe what's called the 7 grandfathers. And you're an adult when you can understand the 7 grandfathers. And there's lots of teachings on them out there now, where it starts from a small age and works up. Like one of them is respect. And it starts at a real small age. You learn to respect yourself. You learn to respect who I am and respect my body. And then you learn to respect the people around you and the things around you. So it was very important for us that the kids knew all of who they were, rather than just, because I'm very white passing and I know this. So I would take my kids to powwows. I would take, my kids to different kinds of camps, and they got to learn from other people, because I thought that was important. As far as the LGBTQ thing, there's not a lot of really good media out there. It's getting better. So quite often when teenagers would come to me and they are coming because they were kicked out of their house for being gay or queer in some way, we had a list of movies that were like the first queer movies you had to watch. And the first one was always But I'm a Cheerleader. It's a classic, and no gay people die. And that's a big thing, because if you watch enough TV and you watch enough movies, and it's a code from the back in the 1920s that I won't get into, that people who were LGBTQ had to have a bad ending. So finding movies nowadays where they don't is hard. So we always start with that one, because it's quite literally about a girl who thought she was perfectly normal. She's a cheerleader. She's very girly. And her family's like, nope, we think you're gay. So they send her to a camp to not be gay anymore. And she actually learns to accept herself. And it ends well for all of the kids. And I thought it was really important for my LGBTQ kids to see that there are movies where, and there is media where you can have a happy ending. There is a happy ending. You're not going to end up badly just because you're LGBTQ.
Thank you. One of the questions that we got from one of our participants is mostly related to foster care. It's how do you adoption and foster care. So how do you foster a relationship between biological children and adopted children, and how do you ease that transition for everyone that's involved?
I think, for my family, I think it's just been a lot of, when we welcome a child into our home, and so often, those placements tend to come like late at night. Sometimes the child is scared and overwhelmed and just hungry, and maybe they don't sleep well that night, but we just really normalize. When we wake up in the morning, we welcome the kiddo, we get some of their favorite foods, all those things. But with the kids, we just really normalize, this is so-and-so, and this, this child's staying with us now. And we don't put any dates on it. We don't put any timeframes on it. We are a family under this roof right now. I think, the other thing that I wanted to bring up on that topic is that the siblings component altogether is so complicated within foster care and adoption, because children have been removed from their siblings as well as their parents so often. And I think, we have to really encourage families to really honor those relationships and that sibling relationship between kiddos, because they can't have any control over losing their parent, but we sure can work hard on maintaining those sibling bonds. They're so vital and so important. And so in my family, all of my children adopted out of foster care have a lot of siblings. And my two youngest, in fact, are full siblings to one another, and they come from a sibling set of 8. And so we have maintained really close relationships with all of those kiddos. And so I always say, like, my family might be 7 people living under this roof in this home, but my family is so much bigger than that, because we have those kids over all the time. We go to them all the time. We see them, we interact with them. They are our family as well. They are all our family. Those kids are all of ours, because that relationship is so vital and important. And the kids just grow up knowing that this is their normal, this is their family, this is, and so my kids, it's kind of funny because my kids will sometimes, again, they're young, but they'll sometimes differentiate. Oh, well, Sifa and Fab, they're real brother and sister. And I always correct, like, no, we are all brothers and sisters in this home. We are all brothers and sisters, but they will sometimes differentiate. So they all know that they come from different families of origin. But I think it's just important to really, really foster all of those relationships between siblings. It's vital for kids.
I think too, once you're to a place where maybe you're having problems with, one of the kids that's a permanent person at that point, and then a newer person that may or may not end up being permanent. Sometimes there's, just even in the animal kingdom, there's pecking orders and there's all of these things that you've got to navigate. But I found something that was pretty effective in our family was to take kids on one-on-one time. So, it creates an atmosphere that they can really just kind of talk to you, and sometimes accidentally really slip what they're really worried about. And, maybe that's why they're behaving towards the newcomer like they are. They're feeling threatened, or they're feeling, whatever they're feeling, you just create that space where they just have that special time. But yeah, it's tricky. But, I'll say this too, before we ever did foster care and adoption, I had 3 biological daughters in 4 years, and there's sibling stuff there too. You can't get away from it. So it's just different sibling stuff, I guess.
For our kids, because they come in later, we tell all of our kids that are already in the house, new kids coming in, so they may not know all the rules right away. They may not know that certain things aren't allowed. We're going to discuss it. And we tell the kids that every kid, the first time they walk in our house, they're under the original contract. And the original contract is the contract we have with any of our kids that were born into this household. And the original contract is, we are your parents. We're going to take care of you. You need stuff, you let us know. We go to the store, we get it for you. We've got your back if you need help in school, things like that. Any kid who's on a different contract is a kid who's moved out on their own and maybe had to come back. But all the kids start on the original contract. That's because you're all our kids. It all starts that way. We often have family meetings once a week, where some of the things we do is we'll ask how someone's feeling and encourage to not only give voice to how you're feeling, but no one can say anything about it. So you can just say, I'm feeling really nervous. And people can be like, why? What's wrong? What do you need? No, they're allowed to just give voice to how they feel. And that is fine. We encourage the kids to do things together, because new kids, we forget about all the things that our kids inherently know. Our kids inherently know where the dishes go when we tell them, please put away dishes. Our kids know where the towels are if they need extra towels. A new kid won't know those things and get very nervous. So when we do chores, I often have kids double up. I say, you're shadowing. one of your siblings so they can try that. This sibling likes to cook. Do you know how to cook anything? No, you're 16, you should know how to cook a single dish. So now this kid's going to teach you how to cook. And that way they're doing things together and getting to know each other. And at this point I go out, and it's funny watching people try to figure out which of the kids are the biological kids and which of the kids are not, because most of the time they get it wrong. But I find having the kids working together to make them feel at home instead of having it be all on the parents also helps the kids bond.
Thank you. One of the other questions, I think this is the last one we actually had from the chat, was how do you breach the subject? I would imagine with gender neutrality or anything within the queer community with the older generation, so a person who would be 70 plus. How do you discuss the issues that come up in the queer community with a person of that
I
age?
do not have very much experience with that because I am already older. So my parents are in the 70 plus age range, and they live in Phoenix. So when I transitioned and also when some of my children came out, they did not live near us. So it was up to my children to contact their grandparents, and none of them did. When I came out and began my transition, I wrote them a letter and I never heard anything back from them. So I really have no experience in doing this.
I get a lot of this, and I've had the same problem as far as with being part of the LGBTQ community, as well as a racism issue in my family because my family's mixed race. And I will tell people, I don't buy the excuse they grew up in a different time, because they've been here on this planet since, so they're aware. And also, queer is not new. It's not at all new. And again, with intersectionality, trying to decolonize your mindset, queer's been around forever. Most indigenous cultures actually revere it. It's very important. As a two-spirited person, I am considered a spiritual leader in my community because of it. And so is my kid. When I married my husband, I heard a lot of stuff because my husband is Black. He's Afro-Indigenous. And my grandfather, who grew up very, very white, he actually adopted my father out of a residential school and was racist, put all that aside once we got married because it was more important to him that I was in a good relationship and that he was in a relationship with me. So the first thing I usually tell people is you stop excusing it. There's no reason to make excuses. You can tell them, hey, if you want to learn more, I'm happy to teach you, but it's not weird. It's not bad. It's not any of those things. And I've educated myself on a lot of different religions. I've studied religions for 30 years, and I can tell you there is not a single religious book that says anything about homosexuality being bad. There's not. So when people come to me with religion, I'll be like, that's an excuse because it's not there. And so I think, again, it's more of the, if you want to learn and you want to have this relationship, I'm happy to answer those questions, even the inappropriate ones, even as I explain to you why they're inappropriate. But if you say that's just the way I am, that means you don't want to change. You want me to change for you, and that's not going to work for me. So again, boundaries. These are my boundaries. I will accept and love you for who you are, but I'm not going to allow you to hurt people I care about or be inappropriate on people I care about. So I know a lot of people talk about the generational thing, but it's not new. And generation, it's an excuse.
I have had similar conversations with my peers. They're not 70 plus, I'm 55. So, my peers are around the same age and they have the same sorts of answers. That's how I was raised. I don't accept that. And you don't have to accept it, but this is who I am. And if you can't accept it, then I can not be around you, and that is fine with me. I would much rather maintain a friendship with you, but if you are going to disrespect me, then I don't need that sort of a friendship. I have
You
also
can
studied a
challenge them.
lot. Pardon me?
I was saying you can also challenge them. The same
I've
way I
done that
challenge
too.
my kids, where you say, okay, that's the way you were raised, but you're a thinking person. Have you ever given it more thought? Your own thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you're an adult now. You don't have to behave the way your parents taught you to. I've said similar lines like that. And I have also studied religion a lot, the same as you have. And you're right, none of them say anything about LGBTQ. None of them. They all have the same basic tenets of treat your neighbors with respect.
And if you go into Judaism, there's actually in the Torah 5 distinct genders listed.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, this isn't new.
Not new at all.
I just learned so much. Thank you. So a couple of different questions. We have about 5 minutes left. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. And I also want to highlight, just based on the book list that we talked about a little bit ago, Sarah did put a list that was compiled for this topic in there, and you can also add anything that would be helpful. So feel free to check that out. One last question that I do think actually could be applicable to a lot of folks. When is it okay to ask why someone changed their name? So that could be applicable in a adoption situation and any other situation.
Short answer, it's never okay. Because transitioning, when I changed my first name from a female sounding name to a male sounding name, to have a complete stranger ask me, why did you change your name? Then I have to give the whole story of why I changed. I'm not going to do that. So short answer, it's never okay.
I changed my name legally, my first name, because of the abuse growing up. The way my name sounded when I was about to be abused, I couldn't take it, and I legally changed my name. And so people will ask, like, oh, that's a pretty name, where'd you get it? I picked it. Well, why'd you change your name? You want that story? Probably not. No, there's no reason to, I think as people, we're curious, and that's fine. But there's also a point where you have to understand consent and implied consent. And if I know you, if you are a friend and we've gotten to know each other, there's an implied consent that you can ask a little more about me as a person. But a total stranger, there's no reason for you to ask.
Renee or Carrie, have you any experience with that or any commentary?
And I would just say the thing that's a little different in the adoption community is that, some families do change children's names when they adopt, and for various reasons. But I think that's, I think it's just a very personal decision for people to decide to do that. And I think, again, yeah, there's, people will ask, well, why didn't you change their names, or why did you change that one's name? And again, like Charles said, it's none of your business. There's personal reasons behind all of those decisions. And some people really believe strongly that, in keeping their birth name, you're honor, again, going back to that, honoring where they came from, honoring their story, honoring who they are. And so some people feel really strongly about that. Some people feel like I have to separate their name, maybe for safety reasons. And so again, like none of those reasons are anyone's business but your family's. And so, I think it is all very private.
Renee said everything I would have said. So we changed about half of our children's names, and half of them we didn't change. So it's just, again, very different reasons. And
I do find a good short answer when someone asks me about one of my kids changing their name, because some have changed their names legally, some have asked to take our name, is I just simply say, well, names hold power. That's all you need to know. Names hold power. So whether I changed or why I changed it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your stories. I know we could talk about these topics all night. Again, we put some links in the chat here Sarah did for a survey. So if you'd like to hear more on the topic, we'd love to hear from you. And then there's that book list listed as well. And Sarah, any other last thoughts, or anyone else have anything that you'd like to close with?
No, I just want to thank everybody. Like I said, I think before we went live, when we started this, we didn't realize what a vast topic and how hard it'd be to talk things over in 90 minutes. And you all did amazing. And I love how they wove in together. And I really would love to hear from people, because I personally am part of the adoption community and I want to do more. And I want to learn more about LGBTQ+ as well. So if you like what you had to hear, we'd like to maybe do some more narrower focused panels in the future. So let us know. And thank you, everybody. You did wonderful. I could have kept listening to all the wisdom you have. I'm a younger parent, so that was good to hear. All right. Well, everybody have a good night. Thank you very much.